Oh, this will take you back. Rope Weekly. Today's show is brought to you by The Monk at twistedmonk.com, your source for hemp rope used for shibari or whatever the heck you'd like. Many different diameters, many different lengths. You tell him what you want and he can make it for you. Only using the best organic Romanian hemp rope in a 10-step conditioning process. Professional grade fiber reactive dye, creating brilliant color fast ropes that retain their amazing color without masking the unique feel and smell of hemp. That's right, let me tell you, we have some great products over there at twistedmonk.com. You've got your black rope. Now, some of you are wondering if you've slipped into a time machine, and others of you are wondering what the heck this is about. What you just heard was the podcast from Rope Weekly of March 31st, 2005. That's right, 12 years ago. Well, more than 12 years ago, actually. That was when I first did the Ropecast, and it was, again, sponsored by Twisted Monk, just like it is now. I found it funny that so much of the same things applied. And just to give you an idea of what it was like after 1 month, here's a little bit more. Products, cool t-shirts, mink oil, nose hooks, and even your very own Shibari merit badge. That's right, Twisted Monk at twistedmonk.com. I'd like to just say thank you to those of you who have given me some feedback, all of which has been positive. And we are hitting our second month of podcasting. Our numbers are comfortably over 200 for every podcast, and that's pretty cool. Hey, if I can get 200 people to actually sit and listen to me, that's a accomplishment, I think. It's like my friend said, you know, if I can just make one person smile, just one, well, I'm not doing too well. But it just makes my heart leap with joy to think that I've had 12 years of podcasting success unimpeded by any improvement in the level of humor or jokes. So this reason why I bring this up is because I got an email from a listener asking me where the podcasts before 2007 were. And that was a good question. This was originally a perk that I only gave to my Patreon supporters at patreon.com/greatanswer. And they had access to the lost episodes. However, I can tell you all that the Patreons have been very, very generous for me. They've been helping me out a lot, and frankly, as it seems to be still improving, I am perfectly happy to release these to the wild. And so I can announce that you can go, if you feel so inclined, to ropecastarchive.greatanswer.com. And that link will take you to a Dropbox folder, which is filled with, let's see, how many files are there? We have, doesn't actually show how many files are in there. We have a lot. It goes all the way from 31st of March 2005, all the way up until the 31st of July 2007. And even the Ropecast moved to ropecast.net when I did that change. You also have in that thing, this is the really funny thing, you have a set of videos. Now, please remember, this is back in the dark ages of web video. Okay, these things were shot with, 720, not even 720. They were shot on tape. Some cases they were shot with analog tape and then digitized. And then it was made into a way they could go on the web. And I don't know if you remember before broadband, but we didn't always have these kinds of things. Like Netflix was just a dream. So this is my way of apologizing for the fact that these things are not high quality videos, but they are, I think, interesting in that they show some of the things that were going on. Now, I'll give you some warnings. For example, the Hair Bondage 101 video features complete nudity. There is
various things that you'll look at it and you'll be like, that's completely dangerous. There's some suspensions I did with bamboo tripods and things like that. You can even go back to my very first performance with Cunning Minx and Genevieve. Back in, wow, I can't remember when that was, 2004, 2005, something like that. Anyway, but it's there by popular demand. Now, it is not all of the old Ropecasts. As I mentioned, the Ropecast started on February, was it 5th or 25th? One of those two. Probably February 5th in 2005. And this was, obviously the second month of the Ropecast. And that's because I actually have lost those original episodes. When I did the move from Libsyn, they got rid of some of the old files, and I have not been able to find them. If you happen to be an old school Ropecast listener, now that we're here in kinkexculture land, if you happen to be an old school one and you have those files, please contact me, greatanswer@gmail.com, and I will be happy to negotiate for copies of those files and give you. Well, I can't give you my eldest daughter; she's taken. And the middle daughter, no, she got married too. So did the eldest twin. Youngest, no, you don't want the youngest daughter. She just stabbed her hand. Well, we'll figure out something. And when if you happen to find it, it'd be fun to have the complete set. And I also will say there are some interesting things in there, and that there are even, for example, people that I talk about with great admiration that later on I found out were not so admirable. So yeah, please remember that these are all things from the past, and time changes. But it's also kind of fun because it's a little bit of an oral history of the growth of the rope community around ShibariCon and stuff like that. So a lot of fun interviews, and it's interesting also to see the people that you still hear around. Garth Knight wrote me a letter way back when supporting the things. And in fact, you can hear the change in the audio quality when Mark Deviat got tired of hearing my bad audio quality and bought me a microphone, my first sponsorship. So thank you very much, Mark. Hopefully you've enjoyed the podcast since then. And thank you very much, you who contacted me and asked me about this. It's nice to know you're interested, and I'm hoping you'll enjoy it. Most of all, thank you to my patrons who have been generous enough that I can change this from being a perk to being a general resource. And I hope you all enjoy it. And if you have any questions about it, please feel free to email me, and I'll say, I don't remember, that was a long time ago. It behooves me to also mention my other sponsor, which is, of course, Lee Allure. Now, I've been talking with Lee pretty much every week for about a year now. We're kind of our own little mastermind group, talking with each other about things that we're trying to get done and take care of. And she is on her way to the Entrance Festival, which I can't remember where that is. It might be in the Poconos. I don't know. It's a ways away, and I know she has her car loaded up with cool things like watches and pillows and various hypnotism themed things. But I would always recommend you go to leeallure.com. Among other things, I know she was working on updating a chastity play recording for hypnosis. Now, I may have mentioned this last time. Chastity play, has its various fields. Personally, I've been more into orgasm control than chastity play, but, into each their own. But I fetishize control. And I like the idea of mind fucks also. And in my mind, it would be really amazing to be able to somehow have someone be able to see their cock or their vulva or whatever their sexual apparatus is, and know that they could get excited, but at the same time be somehow hypnotically blocked from actually coming. And that's the kind of thing that Lee plays around with. I remember long ago when I went to her first class, it was at Dark Odyssey, and it's where I met her, and she was talking about it, and I said, well, can you give me some ideas? Because I like actually doing stuff. She sent me a spreadsheet that had about, a couple hundred different ideas for hypnosis. And that was when I finally said, oh, I get it. That makes sense. So neat stuff. And thank you, Lee, for sponsoring this podcast as well. You can find her stuff at leeallure.com. Let's talk personal security, which may not seem like it's sexy, except it's kind of important in this day and age. In fact, we have a friend who has been on the podcast, a very dear friend, who had her phone hacked recently. And because of the phone hack, she ended up having to redo her entire Twitter account. So this is something that, we need to pay attention to. And I recently I kind of fetishize this whole idea anyway. I recently was listening to the Complete Privacy and Security podcast, and they were extolling the virtues of an app called Sudo. It's SUDO. And no, it is not a ultimate control app, all you geeks. It is Sudo, as is a kind of play on the spelling PSEUDO, as in sort of, or a form of. And what the Sudo app does, and here's the part, oh, sorry, I guess I should say, if you are an Android user, you should probably go get a coffee, because right now, Sudo is only available on iPhones. But what it does is it gives you 9 different identities. And by identities, I mean you can change the name, you can change the phone number, it gives you a different phone number, it gives you a different email. You can even get a sister app called Sudo Pay and end up getting like a debit card with that different name, and that is masked from your own accounts. Now, I brought this up at the discussion at the Philadelphia GRUE this last weekend with a forensic accountant, and she was very interested in that idea. When I described it to her, she said that actually would do a pretty good job of masking the purchases, for example, registering at an event. And what the 9 identities that it gives you are free. Now, you may sit there and be like, well, what would I do with 9 identities? Well, I'm going to play off of the Privacy and Security podcast and make some suggestions. They had ideas like have one for travel, have one for your financial processes, so you have a different one to your bank. The one for travel is the one you use for like a rental car or when the hotel says we need a number to get a hold of you. Now, I should add, when it say a number, it's not like you have to go check on the web. That number is basically piped through to your phone. So if they call that number, your phone rings. If they send you an email, your phone notifies you that you have an email. Another use for it, 2-factor authentication, so that you, if you have to receive that via phone, which is not the most secure way, you can do that. And they also suggested you have one that is for your everyday, talking. If you meet somebody new, you're like, well, I like this person, I don't mind them having my real name, but I'm not sure I want them to have my actual phone number. That's one way to do it. Now, here's where it can change. I've talked about 4 so far: travel, financial, 2-factor authentication, and then personal. What if instead of personal, we said vanilla personal? What if you could give your kink identity its own email and its own phone number that would come through to your thing? You could give out this phone number to anybody and say, hey, yeah, I'm great answer, here's my number. And you wouldn't have to worry about them tracking down your other identity. You wouldn't have to worry about them finding you in a phone book or things like that. So you could have a kink number, a kink email. Okay. You could also decide that you're going to have a specific number and email that you use for events. And that is one that I think is possibly the most useful, because I can tell you it is hard on the event side to ensure privacy and security of all of the information you give us. I would love it if everybody would I don't even care about your real name. What I care about is that you show me a photo ID at the gate that shows that you're over 18. And if that photo ID is you and you're over 18, I'm going to let you in. And that is the main legal reason that I need to know it. I don't need to know your real name. I don't need to know your real phone number. I don't need to know your real email. And by real, I mean the one that you would use that's connected to your vanilla identity. So you could use a specific identity for events. On the other side of things, what if you have an event? What if you run an event and you want to have a phone number that is for people to call? You can set up, that's another thing about the Sudo app, you can set different voicemails to every different identity. So you could have a number that you could include on your event announcements that said, hi, this is Ropecraft. We're glad you called. Please leave a message and we will get back to you as soon as possible. I mean, that just adds a level of things. So you could also use one as disinformation. If you ever felt very much pressured to give an email or something like that, and you didn't really want them to know who you were, then you could put that out there. One of the interesting things that they did was for their personal, they had both an overt and a covert identity. Now, the overt one used their real name. So mine would say Gray Miller, and then it would be one of the pseudo identities for the phone number and for the email. But the covert one, the overt one, the email might say graymiller@sudomail.com. It doesn't, by the way, that doesn't actually exist. But the covert one would be just a number. And that would be the one where you'd really be able to give out an ID to somebody that does not have any connection to your real name, to your real thing. Now, I know I'm saying any, and there are some geeks out there that are going, well, if I could find sudo, I could hack their servers. Well, guess what? First of all, sudo is end-to-end encrypted. So you're going to have to pull some pretty fancy shenanigans to get that. Now, I'm not saying you can't, because that would be inviting danger, and hubris is not one of my faults. I'm very proud of that. But the idea is that you may be able to make yourself a little bit safer and maybe have a little bit more of a shield at events if you use this app. I can tell you that if you listen to the security podcast I did with Joe Cool / Johnny Tornado recently, one of the things we were talking about is having a vanilla phone and having a kink phone. I can tell you I am failing miserably at having a working vanilla phone. I don't carry it with me enough. I don't keep it up, and it's just kind of sitting over here in the corner looking lonely, and half the time not even charged. So I'm thinking that I personally may have to go with more of this pseudo thing and carry only one phone. But your mileage may vary. So if you have any suggestions or ideas, try it out. If you have ideas for other uses of it, try those out. I'm basically saying, I mean, these guys, the Privacy and Security Podcast, they take it to the extreme. They don't give out their phone number to anybody. In fact, I think they put their phones in Faraday bags when they get home so that nobody can track them at home. I'm not quite to that level of tinfoil hatness yet, but I do think that it's a good idea to be able to protect your phone number by maybe giving others out there. And there's nothing illegal about that. If somebody says, can you give me a phone number where I can reach you? It doesn't mean it has to be the one that's billed to your name. They just need to be able to reach you. So it's completely legit, but it's an added level of privacy, and I highly recommend it. I think sudo has a lot of value to people who go to events or who try and move around in the kink world. So again, the app is called SUDO, SUDO, and the companion app is SUDO-Pay. Those are only available for now on the Apple iOS apps, but I think it's worth a look. So let me know what you think. My email is great answer, but guess what? You can actually send it to kinkexculture at sudomail, that's sudomail.com. And who knows, maybe I'll even create a pseudo-mail kinkexculture hotline. Oh, and if you use Google Voice, which I used to do, if you happen to use that a lot, that apparently works really well with sudo to be forwarded to that. So as far as I know, no loss there. All right, let's move on to something that is a little less fun to talk about. And of course, I'm talking about consent, because while I talk about consent a lot, this particular one is a little difficult. And this comes directly from someone who asked me a question at the Philly GRUE, and I realized it's a very good question, and it's something I think everyone in the kink community should ask themselves and run through their head. The question was this: what would you do if you were falsely accused of a consent violation? Now let's tear this apart a little bit, because I know you're sitting there and wait, Gray just said consent violation. Doesn't he always say consent incident? That's not what her question was. Consent, if I hear that something happened, if I'm on the IRT, I will say, okay, something happened, an incident happened. There was a consent incident. Later on, it may be determined that it was a consent violation. That's not what her question was. Her question was, what would you do if you were falsely accused of a consent violation? So we're talking violation here. And note the other part of it. What would you do if you were falsely accused? Now, falsely accused, I'm going to assume that the question was not framed around necessarily malice on the other person's thing. You know, somebody said, "I saw you fucking that dog, a dead dog down there," and this is an old Marine joke. You know, "I saw you fucking that dead dog," and you say, "Oh yeah, what'd you tell him?" I said, "I know I saw that dog move." So the sorry again, like I said, the humor has not improved in over a decade. So I think what the way I'm going to interpret the question is more along the lines of, what would you do if someone accused you of a consent violation that you did not believe you had done, or you did not know you had done? And that's kind of actually already talking about the reaction. Someone accuses you of a consent violation, and your first reaction is, "Wait a minute, I didn't do that." How would you react? How should you react? Now, on a macro scale, I could sit here and deflect it and say, we need to create spaces that are safe for people to constructively react to things so that they can find a way and restorative justice and blah, 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 blah. But that was not our question. The other part of the question, aside from consent violation and falsely accused, was, Gray, how would you respond? Now, this is where it gets kind of personal and where I may lose listeners and may be putting my head on the chopping block. But this does address the whole macro idea of people need to find safe places to talk about things. So I'm going to describe a time when I was accused of a consent violation. To my mind, it was a false accusation at the time. Honestly, in retrospect, I'm not so sure it was exactly false. I think there were things that let's just go into it. Here's what happened. I was at an event. I was in a power exchange relationship with a young woman. And at the event, at one point, she had done an infraction of our agreed upon things. And I asked her if she was ready to be punished. And she said yes. And her punishment involved forceful face fucking. And she got done with the punishment, and we got done with the event. I wish I could say, and everybody lived happily ever after. That was not the case. We had a very stormy relationship as it was, which ended, must have been within a month later. I don't even know how much longer, but it did end. After the relationship ended, I got a call, like a few weeks after, I got a call from one of my play partners. And she said, "Hey, did you know that such and so, who happened to be he was both kinky and he was a priest, who was the priest in his congregation was my ex-partner." So my play partner called and said, "Did you know that the priest is going around and asking people questions about you?" I said, "Really? What is he asking?" And they said, "Well, he comes up and the way he asked me was, 'Hey, has Gray ever ignored a safe word or gone past your limits, or has he ever done anything like that to you?'" And I said, "Well, what did you tell him?" And she said, "Well, of course I told him no." And I said, "Okay." And she said, "But why would he ask me that?" And I'm like, "I don't know." I actually had no idea. But I found out that was corroborated by several other of my play partners. At the time, I had lots of play partners here in Madison. And that came out wrong. At the time, I had lots of play partners here in Madison. I still have some play partners here, and no, I only have partners here in Madison. But that's simply because I'm not in Madison that much anymore. Anyway, so I tracked down the priest and I confronted him and I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Well, your ex-girlfriend says that at this event, you non-consensually did a face fucking punishment of her." And now this is where that's the point. I have been accused of something that I thought was consensual, that I thought was back there. And so from my point of view, it was a false accusation. What would I do? I can tell you what I did was not what I would recommend doing. What I did was I yelled at a priest in a public seat in Madison, Wisconsin. In fact, I yelled at him, and I yelled the exact thing that if I heard it now would make me kind of roll my eyes, which is that I first of all, I had a discussion with him about the fact that he was not an investigator and that he was basically trashing my reputation by going around asking my play partners these vague questions. You know, by the way, do you know if Gray has stopped beating his wife yet? And say it in bed. I mean, those kinds of things are not good. Happily, all of my other play partners were, had positive things to say, so he was not getting very far with that part of his quote unquote investigation. But at one point, it got very heated. He was a very passionate priest. He was a new priest. And at one point, I remember something about, he said something about me needing to be brought to, this isn't about legality, this is about justice. And it was all, two white guys sitting there getting on their high horses, being all pompous and basically trying to be justicier than thou. And at one point, I asked him, I said, have you asked her if she had a safe word? And he admitted at that point that he didn't. Now, here's the thing. At the time, that seemed like a very valid point. As it turned out, it was a valid point. That being said, the fact that somebody had a safe word does not mean that a consent violation did not happen. This is something that I know now that I did not know then. This all took place, by the way, right about the time of that, 2008 maybe, I think it was. It was a while ago. I have a better understanding of consent now, and I would tell you that I would hope that I would not react that way now. The way that I react to them, now I can understand that just because someone has a safe word doesn't mean they're in a space where they can use it. They could still have revoked consent in some way. Now, doesn't mean that there's any reason that I would know that she revoked consent if she did not use a safe word, if she gave no other indication. Okay, that is true. That does not change the fact that she might have been hurt by that. That she might have been have had a bad experience. Now, some people will be like, well, if you had a bad experience, that doesn't mean a safe word. You can't retroactively revoke consent. All of that is totally true. You're absolutely right. You know what? Let's use the analogy of a car accident. Okay? Get into a car accident. Somebody, let's say there's an icy road. Me and this other person both lose control, and I hit their car, and they hit my car, and they have whiplash, and they're hurting. Okay? Just because it wasn't my fault, just because I couldn't have known that that was icy at that point or something like that, doesn't mean I won't still be concerned about the damage and the hurt that is there. That is the difference in how I wish I had reacted. I wish I had said to him, hey, I hear that you think something happened. It sounds like there's some pain going on here. Can we talk about it? Can we try and figure out what happened? Now, he did in fact go back to the person and said, well, did you have a safe word? And she said yes. And he says, well, did you feel like you were able to use your safe word? And she said, well, yeah. And basically it came out that she was sort of retroactively not happy with that because of what had happened afterwards. It's one of those situations where if the relationship had gone well, it would have been one of those things you jill off to, on dark night. But as it was, since our relationship ended badly, it gave a bad memory to her, which again is pain. That is something that is there. So I wish I had not reacted in that way when that happened. I wish I had reacted more constructively. And I think that part of what we're trying to do with Consent Rocks is, that's at consent.rocks, if you're looking on the internet. The things we're trying to do is find more constructive ways to react. I can give another example of a not quite exactly the same, not a how would you react if you're accused of falsely accused of a consent violation, but I did have a former partner, who wanted to talk with me about a scene that we had that, in retrospect, she characterized as abuse. And this happened, I think, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and by then I'd had a little bit better idea of how to constructively react to things. And So what actually ended up happening was, she said, I'd like to talk to you. We went out to a cigar bar. We sat down, I had a cigar, and she said, I want to talk to you about this thing that happened at this event. And I sat there, and in my head, I'm going, okay, I'm getting really nervous. I'm getting really anxious inside, but I'm going, just calm, just listen. You know how to listen, Gray. Just listen. And she started to tell me that there was an event. I was part of the staff of the event, and we had a lot of poly issues during the weekend, and I was very tired, but God damn it, we had planned on having this scene, so God damn it, we were going to have this scene. And so we went there and we started having this scene, and it was a brutal scene. Okay, at no point did any safe word, no point did any boundaries get crossed per se. But she said that the tone of and the feeling of stress and anger that I had, whether that was towards her for poly issues or whether that was just towards the event or a combination or whatever, that she really felt like that scene had gone beyond the level of play into the level of abuse. And I was stunned. In my head, I was going, okay, well, that's the end of your presenting career, Gray. You're never going to be teaching again. You're going to have to you might as well just duck out of you are now an abuser, and you have done these things. And she sort of watched my face, and she knew me pretty well, and she said, Gray, stop it. I said, what? She said, I can see what you're doing. You're sitting there beating yourself up, calling yourself an abuser. I said, well, isn't that what you're saying? And she said, no, I'm saying that one thing was abuse. And she said, you are not what you do once, you are what you do repeatedly. Which is not entirely true. There are some things that once you do them once, you are that forever. Murder, rape, fatherhood, these things come to mind. These are things that once you do them, you are always them. Being in the Marines, I can never not be a Marine. Okay, that's just something I did once. But in this case, she said that she did not look at me as an abuser. And before any of you out there start to say, well, that's too bad, Gray, you are, you know what? Guess what? That's for her to decide. I will listen to her verdict on me. I will not listen to yours. And she said, you have since then, we have had other scenes that were great. I heard nothing but good things about your interaction with other partners. I just needed you to know that this one thing had happened. And I realized that was what she needed. She needed me to sit there and hear what she said. So, I'm not saying that is a magic bullet. I'm not saying that is something that would always work. But I think one of the primary ways that you can constructively react to a accusation of a consent violation is to listen. Is to sit there and listen in a state of being willing to be wrong. Now, I had a really hard time with that because when I was hearing what she was saying, my self-identity was starting to change. That I was an abuser. Oh my God, this is horrible. What's going, and that attacks my core identity because I don't think of myself as an abuser. That's a hard thing to get past, and this is why I'm not saying this for people who are accused. I'm saying this for people that watch other people react to being accused. Okay, it is entirely possible that a large part of their reaction is because their core identity is being challenged. And trying to hold the possibility in their head that they may not be the person that they think they are is a very difficult thing. And if you don't understand that, it's probably because you've never been faced by that. So that's the first thing, is I think you have to listen, and then you have to listen within a space of being willing to be wrong. That's the problem with calling it a false accusation. Because if you cannot accept that you might be wrong, or actually you can still be right, and they can also be right. The whole reason we called this Rashomon early on at the Consent Rocks is because you can have an experience and they can have an experience and they can be in the same place with the same actions and it be totally different. A light version of this was a scene I did with Do Not Go Gently. Okay, Do Not Go Gently and I had a scene. This was at the Connecticut GRUE, I believe. And I tied her up to a web, one of those chain webs. I tied her up and I reached into her toy bag because my toy bag was there and I pulled out a knife. And I should add, I pulled out a big, long, like machete type knife. And then I reached in, looking for another one, found another one. Big, long machete type knife. Reached in again. Big, long machete. She had 5 of these big, long machete type knives. And that was just the start of her toy bag. And I asked her, why do you need 5 big, long machete type knives? And she had said, well, you can't ever have enough knives, which she's right. So, sorry, I digressed. Anyway, so we had a great scene. Knife play, rough body play. I tied her up to the web, and it was a lot of fun. At one point, I'm climbing up on the web, and I'm, mauling on her and stuff like that. So we get all done. And somebody walks over, and this is after Kara was, it was a fine thing to do. And the person walked over and says, "Oh, that was so lovely to watch you submitting to him." Now, those of you who know Do Not Go Gently are sitting there going, "Oh, what'd she do? Oh my God." Because Do Not Go Gently, at least in our relationship, definitely did not submit. And she said as much. She said, "I was not submitting to him," with flames coming out of her eyes. And I said, I smiled and said, yeah, she bottomed me there, but she was not submitting. And I thought about it, and I looked at her and I said, you may not have submitted, but I sure as fuck felt dominant. We had had the same situation, the same scene, but for me it had felt dominant, and she had felt bottoming. That's fine. Both are valid. It's not more or less or anything like that. Neither of us was wrong. That's just the way the experience happened. And that can happen in situations. You can have a situation where one person is experiencing something wonderful and hot and sexy, and the other person is having a horrible, horrible time. Maybe even they thought that they made a signal that meant, hey, I want to stop this. And maybe the other person didn't hear it. And at that point, that becomes a boundary crossing, a violation, something like that. Certainly it's an incident. It means something happened. And so my hope is that if I was accused of that, the first thing I would do would be try and make sure that everybody who was hurt by this, which could include me, was getting the resources they need. And the second thing would be to be able to listen to what was going on with a mind towards understanding it and figuring out what the constructive thing was to happen next. I mean, the constructive thing that happened with my friend my partner who had said that I had a scene that was abusive with her, was that was more evidence that it was a good thing I was working on anger management at the time, which I was. I've actually been working for many years on anger management issues, and it has improved a lot. So and it also taught me better how to do self-care at events, and why that's necessary. And when my friends wonder why I insist that they get more sleep, or things like that at events, that is part of the reason why. So that's my answer to my friend's question of how would you respond to a false accusation of a consent violation. I would like to hear what you think, either about how I reacted. I'll open myself up to that kind of criticism, or just about how you think you would react. And if you are sitting there going, well, I don't need to think about this, I'm a bottom, you have not been around the kink community very long, regardless of who you are. Regardless of if you even identify as top bottom, maybe you identify as, primal sea sponge. I don't know. Whatever it is very possible for you to violate someone's consent without realizing it. And if you don't know how you're going to react, if you haven't thought about it, then you're going to react in whatever way your little amygdala decides. And your amygdala is going to be like fight, flight, or lie, or posture, or whatever. So I suggest you give some thought to it. All right. Now that we've totally downed everything, I have one more treat for you. Now, this is a treat right here because it's going to be a kind of a way to play out things. I got to perform a little self-suspension singing song at the Mischievous show that Shay and Stefanos put on at Dark Odyssey Fusion, and it was a lot of fun, really enjoyable, and I was asked to re-record the lyrics so it was more hearable because we had some mic problems, and play it. Now, I don't like this recording. I'll tell you right now. I don't like the way my voice sounds. I don't like the fact that you can't see what I'm doing, but it was asked for this. Now, I'm going to play it out here after I thank Twisted Monk, twistedmonk.com, for sponsoring this podcast, and also very much thanks to leallure.com for also helping to support this, paying for things like hosting on Libsyn. You can find all the podcasts at kinksexculture.com, as well as finding links. You can find us on iTunes. And I am also going to play this here now on this podcast. It's not terribly convenient. If you decide you really want to have this as an actual MP3, well, guess what? You will have to go to patreon.com. This will be a perk that will be included for my $1 and up patrons. So for just $1 a month, you can hear this lovely tune and have it downloadable to use to your heart's content. And that, of course, is the song is I Will Be Tied, sung to the tune of I Will Survive, not the Gloria Gaynor version, the Cake version. So thank you all very much. And I want you all to remember that it's not always black and white in the areas of kink, sex, and culture. And so that's why you really need to learn to dance in the gray. At first I was afraid, I was petrified, kept thinking I might be less domly if I dared self-tie. And then I spent so many nights just tying munters on myself. My rope was long, but my harnesses grew strong, and now I'm back up on this stage. I just walked in and found you here with this here rope around my waist. That's right, I tied this fucking knot. That's right, I'm bottoming to me. When it comes to aftercare, I'm gonna cuddle some whiskey. Tecate co, stay away from me. I'll grab my ankle, bend my leg, and futu momo shibari. Weren't you the one who thought I needed someone to tie? Did you think I'd fumble? Did you think my rope would unwind? Oh no, not I. I will be tied. Yes, as long as I can make a loop, I know that you will fly. I've got lots of rope to hitch. I'm a self-suspending bitch. I will be tied. I will be tied. Yeah, yeah. Now, you may wonder, how does one get to be able to both sing and tie a fucking awesome self-suspension harness at the same time? To which I have 2 words for you. Selfsuspend.com. I know you think it's 3 words, but it's a URL, so it's actually 2. Selfsuspend.com. It's the site run by Shay, and it has everything you need to know to be a self-suspending bitch. It took all the rope I had. I only took 1 class. I'm tying hard so I can sexily suspend my ass. And though I spent so many nights just tying bowlines on myself, I used to whine. But now I lift my body high and you see me up here in jute. And did I mention that the tension makes my ass look cute? So you go and do some kinbaku, or maybe try some new box tie. But now I'm saving all my rigging for the ultimate rope guy. Up I go, up off the floor, I'll turn around now, and in the morning I'll be sore. Did you really think I'd need a bottom just to tie? Did you think I'd fumble? Did you think my cock would fail to rise? Oh no, not I. I will be tied. Yes, as long as I can make a loop, I know the jute will fly. I've got lots of rope to hitch. I'm a self-suspending bitch. I will be tied. I will be tied. Yeah, yeah.